Hi, welcome to HeadTalks, a podcast from Head Forwards. I'm your host, Owen Hodge, and today I'm joined by producer at Engine House, Natasha Price. Tash, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And it was about a month ago at Little Orchard Festival over Rattler that we were thinking, let's get you on the podcast.
If only we'd have just recorded it then, it would have been great.
It was, the conversation, from what I remember of it at least, it was really engaging.
It was flowing.
It was flowing really well, so no pressure now. So just for the people watching, would you mind giving us a bit of an introduction to Engine House and the sort of projects you're working on?
Yes, so Engine House is an animation studio based in Redruth. We create content, CG animated content for film, TV, games, interactive, immersive, online, just about anything that moves.
Yeah, cool. And so we'll be talking about a few things today, but can you talk to us a little bit about how, obviously I imagine, very fast moving industry. How do you guys find being based in Cornwall to start with? Is that usual for a company in your industry?
No, it is not. So obviously, London is definitely the hub of animation. Actually, there's a lot going on in Bristol, to be fair. Obviously, kind of Aardman set up shop there, and there's a lot of kind of, I think because of that, quite a big sort of flocking to Bristol. But then, yeah, definitely kind of London is the key hub. I think probably pre-pandemic, we kind of felt the challenge of that a little bit more, just not being in that sort of very small parameter where there's, kind of a lot of studios. Mm-hmm. But equally, I think, it sort of, again, post-pandemic, everything's sort of generally online now. We head up there kind of once a month or so just to kind of keep in check. But I think, we get to live in Cornwall. There's a work-life balance. There's a kind of approach to life. It's a really creative place, and we've got the beach on our doorstep. For a while, our little tagline was "the studio on the beach." So I think you can, you can use it to your strength as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Head Forwards have very much done the same. Obviously, working with not just local but national and international clients like yourselves. There's a cool hub of techie stuff actually going on in Cornwall, which might not be the traditional industry, but definitely is the modern, it seems to be a modern push for cool stuff happening down here. And if you ever need to bring a client down for a potential meeting, great locations to take them out to. And
a pasty helps, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. People are saying it's like the Silicon Valley of the UK. But okay, we'll take that.
Why not? So obviously the location's not a challenge too much for you guys. So what's the technology like in the industry in terms of moving? When we've spoken before, we've talked about needing to stay at the cutting edge to really stay ahead of the game. Can you talk to us a little bit about the tools, technologies you're using, how you stay at that cutting edge?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, things are changing so quickly in the kind of tech. I think tech across pretty much every industry, but certainly ours. I think you sort of mentioned we moved to the Unreal Engine, so real-time renderer in 2020. We were awarded the Epic Mega Grant, and that's been a huge shift in animation, and we were sort of very early to kind of hop onto that train, and a lot of studios are kind of exploring it now, but that's one of many changes of the way things are moving. So we're also looking a lot into things like motion capture and facial capture. That's becoming a much more affordable option now, which helps kind of streamline a lot of processes. But sort of, beyond that, obviously we've kind of got things like AI coming in, and that's sort of, only in a very kind of niche section of the market where you're also now looking at sort of how are streamers doing things, how are people watching things online, how are audiences interacting with content. All of that is changing so quickly, and sort of being responsive to that is really important. And I think it's a really key thing for us to do, to keep an eye on what kind of these changes and how that's affecting things, but also how can we then respond to that, how can we bring things into our pipeline. I think what's good about being a small team is that we can have these conversations frequently, and we can do something really impactful straight off the back of having one of those conversations. And it will literally be a conversation of, I was reading this article last night and I've had this idea, and what can we go and run and try today that we can that could maybe sort of change the way we do things. So it's kind of constantly being iterative and then sort of actively doing something about that. That helps.
Yeah, it's cool. We've got that in our team actually, and it's quite a creative space for our developers as well. And again, trying to stay on top of and at the front edge of these ever-changing tools is important. But giving the space for the developers to do that is equally important. if we were just focused on churning out the same kind of stuff constantly, they wouldn't be looking at the new and innovative ways to use the change in tech. Sounds like you're doing the same, sort of like you say, you're exploring with it, playing with it, and then you're looking for the use case and the project to come in where you can then use that new cool way of doing something that you found.
Exactly. And I think, at the moment we're generally working on sort of shorter form projects. So with sort of quicker turnarounds, they're kind of extending as we're moving into bigger projects. But it's a cool way to, like you said, sort of test and try different things on various projects, sort of make a, sort of bespoke workflow for each of those projects. What's going to work here? This project, they want to try this out. Oh, we could try that new tool. Oh, I read about this thing the other week. Someone on Twitter posted this cool thing, and it's sort of bringing all of those elements in for the right project, as you say, and kind of, sort of testing them, failing quick, tweaking it, and then kind of sort of adapting. Each project should bring sort of something new to your kind of approach or pipeline.
Cool. And so you've mentioned it there, actually. It's the article I read that you put out a couple of years ago now, so I guess in a quickly evolving industry maybe that's already out of date, but the switch to the Unreal Engine seemed to be a pretty big moment for you guys and the sort of work you're doing. Can you just tell us a little bit what that means and what that journey was like, what you were using before? Are you still using it now? Is it evolving now 2 years on?
Yeah, the move to Unreal was definitely, I think, like you said, a big sort of turning point for the company. We were always, previous to that, still looking forward, kind of changing things. So we were early adopters of GPU over CPU rendering, which was just a sort of quicker, more efficient way, and in our minds it kind of gave a better look as well. We then had a custom machine built in Poland that we called the Beast, that I think it had sort of 16 graphics, I don't know, a record amount at the time of graphics cards, and so it was kind of always, how are we reducing this sort of really procedural time? How can we get results quicker? How can we see things? How can we be more creative? And Unreal was just the kind of clear next step for that. So real time gets rid of your sort of rendering time, which means that rather than putting a scene together, leaving it overnight, crossing your fingers and hoping that in the morning you come into something that works, you're getting sort of immediate response to that. You can see exactly how it's going to look in the end. You can sort of change lighting, you can change colours. It's so tangible there in front of you, and it allows you just to be way more creative and efficient.
Cool. And would you say the technology helps you? You mentioned a second ago as well that you are still quite a small team, which for 10 years you said before that you've been sort of going. Then does that help you remain at a small team, even though I guess the work and the projects have increased? You've not necessarily grown in terms of people.
Yeah, exactly. I think we like to sort of see it as small but mighty, and I think the ability to be so autonomous comes from being that smaller team. We're sort of able to compete with much bigger studios who, obviously turning out amazing work and have this, huge talent base behind them. But it was just never our goal to have a studio of, hundreds of animators that you then have this pressure to keep them busy. And also, like I said, we were able to make these changes on a kind of project by project basis that it forms part of our kind of approach in the way we take on projects. We don't have, we're not currently working on a 3-year series where it's kind of you're locked into a certain sort of strategy and way that you're going to approach it. We can sort of bend and flex. And I think as well, just even the kind of, unwritten rules and kind of way we interact with each other, the company culture is, 4 people sat in a room having a nice time with each other. It's sort of so I think there's just a sort of a feeling and a sort of sense you get with that small team where you're, I don't think you should have to write a company culture in a document because you've sort of already lost it. It's a sort of natural thing we have.
Cool. So that allows you to move quickly, I guess, and in terms of your internal processes and how you run. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you set yourselves up as a team and how that's possibly evolved, as well as the technology, how your processes have evolved? Yeah,
so being a small team, I think for a long time we were pretty process light. I think we kind of avoided anything that felt too admin-y, I think, and we sort of had a business coach a few years ago, and he was always sort of repulsed by our lack of writing anything down or kind of having these really sort of clear guidelines. But I think for a long time that was actually a big part of our strength, is that we kind of had a natural flow and a way that we worked, and we weren't sort of spending huge amounts of time deciding how we were going to spend our time. But I think since the sort of projects that we're taking on are kind of getting bigger, we're collaborating more, and some of the sort of workflows are getting a bit more complicated. We know that we needed a sort of core system in place for that. So I have found the tool of all tools, which is called Notion, which is a sort of fully customizable sort of project management come sort of resource holder. It's a little bit of everything. And what's great about that is you get to really tailor it to exactly what you need. And we're now building in automation from that. So that speaks directly to Unreal Engine and to Maya, which is the what we animate in. And again, you're just removing processes. So rather than an animator having to spend loads of their time pulling in animation sequences, right? What assets are in this? What characters? What do I need to load into the scene? What was the scene name? How long is it? What frame does it start on? All of that information's in Notion. Unreal can pull all that information. The scene is there ready. It's brought everything in that you need. And again, it's just, how do we allow artists to spend the most amount of time being creative and not just having to do admin, essentially.
Yeah, sure. So you're making use of sounds a bit like automation in your pipelines and your workflow. And anything more you want to add in that space? And are you sort of starting to touch into the area of AI? And if so, how? And if you're not yet, where do you see that fitting in the future?
Yes, we're in the world of AI. I think you kind of have to be to an extent. I think it's the key, of course, is that it's not about replacing people. It's about kind of how do you bring this in to empower people to get things done better. So we use Midjourney a lot. It is crazy powerful, and again, it's not in kind of the idea isn't to replace concept artists. It's to give them the best possible brief you can. And also it's just even throwing ideas against a wall in 20 minutes you can have 100 images from Midjourney, and you get to sort of pick and choose bits that you like about all of them. So that's really powerful. And then some use of ChatGPT in terms of writing some code, and even sort of when you have an application or something that's a bit drier, you feed it all the information. You're still coming up with the kind of the tone and the things that you want to say, but it can put it in a very nice sort of pithy little sentence that maybe you'd have agonized over for a day. It can just sort of spit out. So it obviously it's a powerful thing, and I think it's going to get pretty crazy from here on in. But I think it is coming on that fast because there's a reason for it, and it has its uses.
What about on the I get it from the sort of development side, what about the creative angle? Do you see a place where AI is being used to create the content of what you're producing, or do you think that's still a human?
I think that has to be a human, and I think even if you're using AI, an idea has to come from a person that it puts that input in. But I think obviously the thing to be careful about with AI is it's only scraping information that you get from other places, so it's never gonna rock the world. It's never going to come up with something super original. It's kind of it's improving or changing what information it already has, so it's never going to sort of fully shake anything up. It'll sort of, here's a tweaked version of something you've seen before.
Okay, that's very much the same sort of understanding we've got in the team I'm involved with at the moment, actually, which is we don't see AI as replacing developers, certainly not anytime soon, but it is a useful tool for them to have in their toolbox, particularly when it comes to more on the automation side of things, but being able to repeatable or time consuming tasks that we often do at the beginning of a project, leading on AI in that way can be useful, but like you say, that creative bit still requires a human, so certainly don't see that replacing our developers.
Exactly. And why it's not the best use of their time to do something that's repeatable or procedural. You want them to be hands-on doing what they do best for most of their time.
For sure. That's a little bit about the technology. We've touched a little bit on your processes. Would you say that you're using agile ways of doing stuff? I know it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question, because when we've spoken before many times, there's been a resistance to admit that you're working in an agile way, or to that you're going to do agile. Talk to us about if that's still the case, or whether you're...
Yeah, we're agile. Yeah, I think we were agile for a long time without realizing it, and I think we don't necessarily kind of sort of fit the exact, particularly the way it sort of originated, I suppose. But yeah, there's a lot of sort of practices and things that we've brought in, and we like to sort of take pause on projects whenever we get a moment, sort of put our head above water and sort of assess where we're at, what we're doing, what else do we need, is there something that's kind of missing here, how do we kind of how could we have done that better, is there a tool that we don't have, and I think we like to get to a result as quickly as possible, so we do a lot of kind of things around what's the MVP we can pull together here, how quickly can we get an idea across to a client or to each other, how can we pitch something in its kind of most infant space so that we can get feedback on it. It's a lot of that kind of iterative process of we're not making the Mona Lisa every time we sort of show something to someone. We want to kind of throw some stuff together quickly, and then sort of what we do should be collaborative, and so it's exactly that process but just sort of quicker, and how you sort of share all that idea.
Yeah, cool. I think that's also what I've seen in some of the recent teams I've been involved with, actually, which is being agile in your adoption of using agile. I've said this before, I think maybe on another podcast, but just essentially, rather than having this, I think this sort of industry, if you like, has moved on a little bit from here's the textbook of how you do it and this is what you must follow, and that means that you are now an agile organization, to, like you said, when you start off maybe your process light, and that actually makes sense, because especially if you're in a smaller team, more of a startup, and maybe even mentality, you just need to get stuff out there and get value out there quickly to whether it be the investors or the stakeholders of the business, and then it's later on when the projects start to grow and possibly the team grows that you need to start to layer in bits of process, but picking which bits of process you need at that moment in time, rather than trying to just throw it all in there at once. So as you said, you've evolved and you're now working to MVPs, you're retrospecting by the sounds of it. You might not be using all of the buzzwords necessarily, but you're doing those things. Is kind of what I've seen again in the team that I'm working in at the moment, actually, is like, and evolving that process, not getting hung up on going, right, this is how we're going to do it now forever. But in a month's time, we might actually go, you know what, we tried that, it doesn't really work for us, so let's go and do something different now.
Exactly. I think fail fast is kind of a big sort of thing we like to get behind, and we joke a lot if we tried something, it didn't really work out. Well, you learn so much from it. You kind of there's you can take stuff away, and I think, like you said, not being married to a sort of a particular approach or method, and I think what's nice is at the moment we're sort of able to kind of carve out this sort of niche where we're kind of sort of go-to people in Unreal Engine, but maybe not in 10 years. It's hard to know, and we don't know where the kind of the tech will be, or what we'll be doing, or where the industry will be at, and it's being constantly able to pivot from that, which is what we also think has kind of given us this edge within our industry, is that we're not kind of so tied into kind of systems and ways of doing things that have worked for 50 years, but maybe now it isn't the kind of the best approach, and that we're able to be so much more nimble than that.
Yeah, cool. And it's definitely a almost like a mindset and a cultural thing before you even think about the details of the specific processes or tools that you use, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a state of mind.
Yeah. I think you've mentioned a couple of the tools that you are using. Is that sort of what you see? Obviously, the Unreal Engine is a massive thing. I've heard about it and read about it in the article I mentioned earlier. Is that how the industry is sort of moving, or is that how it is even? Not even how it's moving, but in terms of a big organization creating a platform and a tool set that then allows independent developers or smaller companies and organizations to jump in and start using those tools to produce content?
I think to an extent, yes. The kind of sort of path that Epic have been on with their Unreal Engine is crazy, and it was a sort of huge engine. Tons of games have obviously been made in it. Then they made Fortnite, and kind of it sort of exploded from there. And then I think from that they kind of saw these kind of kind of crossovers with animation and the sort of power that could have. I think they probably also saw a lot of the challenges within the animation industry. And then that's when they started their mega grants program. So it's trying to encourage people to use their tool as their kind of go-to for animation. I think the mega grants, studios like us, it will have been really empowering to indie companies. But I think you're starting to see kind of the bigger players sort of, they're getting the message now. And even though, like I said, with a sort of bigger team, it might have been slower for them to kind of get in there. They're moving into this world now. We noticed a couple of years ago, we got taken out to Annecy Animation Festival by Epic, and we sort of did a demo of their tools and how we were using it for animation. But yeah, then pretty quickly we're sort of seeing, pretty big name studios. They're putting features and series out in the engine. And I think that's definitely the way things are going. But we like to think that our kind of adoption of it pretty early, the kind of experience and expertise we have in it now, and the way that we're sort of bringing in other tools and processes on top of it, kind of still giving us that edge.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like it, because, well, like I say, because now you'll be looking out for what I'm sure will be one of the early adopters of the next big thing, right? Like you say, it's taken I guess the bigger the organization, the more people you have and the more projects you're running, the slower that transition is to then adopt the new latest and greatest way of doing something. So yeah, being a smaller team, being able to pivot, as we've already mentioned, quickly allows you to be ahead of the curve the next time around as well. And yeah, other companies will always catch up, but then you're already thinking about the next thing, unless they're just now starting to adopt the thing you were doing 2 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we hope. And I think as well, Unreal sort of, to an extent, it's become a bit of it's a thing people have heard, and they're kind of like, oh, we must be using this Unreal thing. Whereas, we know the ins and out of it. We know what's good, we know what's bad, we know why we're using it and the best way to use it. And I think you can't, you can move everything over, but that still is a process that takes time.
Do you see that the gaming industry is at the forefront, if you like, of developing a lot of the technology and the tools that are then cross over and are used in the film and TV space?
I think so. I think generally the games industry is developing really well. I mean, obviously, it has its issues, and there's kind of been a lot of news stories recently about people being like worked to death. But I think the way kind of projects can move through sort of pitching and finance and production is working really well. And I think, like you said, the kind of the tech side of it is coming on so quickly, and the quality of games now is ridiculous. And I think there's a definite sort of convergence between sort of film and games. Games are sort of so much more cinematic now, and then films becoming much more immersive and interactive, and it's exciting to see how they're this sort of crossover that we're getting. And I'm really excited to see how, in 10 years time, where that's at. And it's definitely interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, for sure. What about then if you, you're making great use of the tools that you've got available to you, do you ever hit that point where you need to develop your own way of doing something, or bend a tool that you've adopted in a way that it's not been used before? Again, if you're at the cutting edge, I'm sure that must happen. Have you got anything in that space, any examples?
Yeah, I think the thing with Unreal is they're constantly developing it. They're adding new features, which is obviously amazing. But there's always more that you want out of a tool. And I think as well, they're adapting it so quickly. They bring in one amazing new feature, but it breaks another thing. And there's always sort of some amount of juggling that you're doing. And I think, exactly. We like to push the technology to its limit, and then quite often, how do we then sort of surpass that as well? What can we bring in? What tools can we develop, or how can we tweak our pipeline to fit into this? And what's great about being a recipient of the mega grant is we get to use their developer network. So we are constantly on there asking various questions. Why doesn't this work? Is there a way that we can fix this? And kind of essentially getting to beta test their tech. And it's nice because I think in a sort of a very small way, we're kind of helping dictate where that kind of,
for sure,
where the technology sort of evolves, and how it, can work for a studio like ours. So I think there's definitely sort of, you're still fixing some of it, and I don't, no one tool will ever do every single thing you want it to do, but it's how you kind of, build in processes around that.
Yeah, absolutely. again, that echoes exactly some of the work that I see our developers doing. You know, the tool sets, and particularly from the big sort of vendors, if you like, are constantly evolving, going through sort of evergreen change, and that means that, yeah, quite often you are almost beta testing it because they push so much out, and it's like, okay, this is great, this gives us a new way of delivering the next project, but what knock-on effect has that had to this other project we've already got in motion at the moment? You know, and yeah, being at the edge of that and cutting edge and giving the team the space to explore that and make sure we're at the front of it is key. So where do you sort of see the projects coming from for you guys? Because I know that you've done a lot of work for different types of, both in film and gaming, but also you produce some of your own content as well from some of your own ideas. What's that balance like?
Yeah, the business is kind of got two sides. So we've got client facing, where, like we said, there's a whole range of different projects that we take on. We're sort of slowly growing the size of those projects. Whilst we still want to, be nimble enough, it's nice to sort of really get creatively involved in a project. We like sort of taking that from start to finish. We think that's where we can bring the most value as well. Is, again, it's, how can we build an entire system that's bespoke for this project? If we're sort of fitting into other people's workflows, it doesn't seem like you're getting the best use of the way we've sort of built our team. But then, extrapolating that further, we're developing our own slate of film and TV projects. So that's internal ideas as well as IP that we've optioned or brought in. And that's definitely sort of the most exciting thing to us. And again, it's really sort of creatively owning something. And, we all got into animation not to have, built the cleverest workflow for a project, is because we want to tell stories and make, pretty things and sort of affect an audience and share that with people. So, it's a side of things that we're really excited about. And, we're hoping that between having a strong slate of creative ideas and then the sort of smart and effective way of working on those, it's a little dream team, and that's the sort of the message that we just need to get out there now.
Cool. And what do you find the originality like of some of the work out there? I think you might have mentioned it earlier on, in terms of seeing stuff that's been done before. Who's coming up with the more unique ideas? Are they like big studios, or do they play it safe and do what's been done before? And is it the more independent story creators coming up with the great ideas, or the opposite way around? I don't know. It's
both. I think we're at a sort of an odd time in the industry. It's there's a lot of really frustrating things, and we're seeing a lot of it feels like you're seeing a lot of the same thing over and over again. And maybe AI is starting to play a part in that, but I think also just a lot of buyers play it safe. This worked well 5 years ago, this is just it again, it'll probably sell and be fine. And I think when you're pitching ideas, there's an idea just comps where you sort of you reference two films that have done well and you imagine the two of those together. Whereas we're sort of trying to push things a little bit more in terms of the style, the story, even the sort of visual look, and the audience that we're going for. And you're sort of starting to see that come through. So Spider-Verse obviously just revolutionized just stylistically the look. And then that was followed up by things like Arcane, which was also much more adult facing, so much more sort of mature, inspired by more Eastern animation, and then things like Nimona as well. So I think stylistically we're moving in the right direction, starting to see some exciting stuff, but sort of story wise and what audience we're still feeling frustrated that it seems to be the same things and that people are playing it safe. And we're sort of saying just give us less money than you'd give that person, but we'll come up with something that's way crazier, but it'll still be sellable. And it seemed, I know it's sort of, there's probably a naive way of looking at us, but to us it just seems to make so much more sense. And that that is surely what art is, and that's what we're all trying to do. But of course it's all tied into the world of a market and money and stuff as well.
Isn't it? You mentioned it yourself, that's exactly what I was thinking was, is that AI starting to play a role, or is it humans almost acting like AI by literally looking at the numbers and the data to say, like you said, these two films did well, so therefore let's put them together and make another film that must do well, right? Because the data's told us that's the case, rather than looking at the, I don't know, the more creative side and the unique storytelling. It's looking at what's done well before because it made money, so now we're going to
exactly. It is really data driven, and it's kind of a shame. And I think we're also in a kind of age at the moment where everything has to be IP based.
Right.
So, unless you've got this, huge recognizable name that, your film or your TV series or your whatever it is kind of based on, that, no one wants to put that much money into it, because who's heard of, your lovely little idea that you think's, precious and everyone should be a part of it. It's, I think that, obviously Barbie, I mean, sure, it was cool. It was really great, but I'm sort of concerned a bit, I suppose, about this kind of, that we're only, living in a world of franchises, and that's not necessarily where the best originality comes from.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned before about getting as much done as like 40 people, but with your team of 4.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that, what that learning process is like, how you get that done?
I think that it's sort of not all been a learning process necessarily in terms of how we kind of arrange ourselves. I think as I mentioned earlier, there's a sort of unwritten kind of approach where we like to go about things, and it seems sort of weird to it. I think we worked in a vacuum for quite a long time, and then only sort of recently kind of put our heads up to see what everyone else was doing, and it was crazy to us that people weren't just sort of doing the work. There was kind of so much other stuff sort of built in, and sort of process, and just things that were getting in the way of being creative, figuring it out, getting a job done. And I think quite often we purposefully go for projects that we know will sort of challenge or push us, and it's a kind of biting off more than we can chew, or even sort of having absolutely no idea how we're going to get it done, but knowing that we will find a way. And I think we one of the things we really like about these kind of quicker turnaround projects, and for a long time we were sort of a go-to of, we've got 4 weeks and like, oh my god, we need this like thing making, is that at day one you have nothing. There's sort of a fag packet idea, you've got these sort of like rough the client's giving you some images, or like, oh god, it sort of needs to say this, and then that in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, however long you've given yourself, you're going to be watching a thing, and just sort of knowing that we have belief in ourselves that we know we will somehow get through it, we'll get it done, and in a X amount of time you're sat there knowing you'll be watching it. And that's it's that excitement that I think kind of drives us to keep sort of taking on these sort of difficult or challenging projects that we have to, it's just problem solving on a sort of massive scale really quickly. And that's what sort of, I think that's something we get really excited about, and definitely sort of gives us that momentum to keep going, I suppose.
So you're carving out that little bit of niche as well then, of being the go-to company for that kind of time and budget is at a pinch, but
good, fast, cheap, that's but exactly. And I think it's that thing, it forces you in a way to be more creative. It feels like you're having that stripped away from you, whereas actually it's just sort of quick decision making, quick turnarounds, again, coming back to the MVP thing, what can we see? Okay, like, right, we've made a call, that's now locked. Oh, actually, I do want to change my mind. No worries, because we've built a workflow where you can do that. And it's just, how do we, enable that to the best of our ability?
How do you find the customers or the stakeholders to be? Are you catching up with them, I assume, based on what you said, quite frequently, so that you're showing them, hey, this is what we've done. We spoke yesterday or a few days ago. Is this what you meant?
Exactly. We try and do that as much as possible. I mean, secretly in a dream world, they would just leave you alone, and you could get on with it. But of course, you need that feedback and that collaboration. And we've done sessions where we've brought the client and they are looking at Unreal Engine, and we're moving around to see, right, you don't want that light, okay, we'll turn it off. That's what it looks like without it. Do you want that to be red? Okay, cool. We'll change that. And that's a really cool process to go through. And I think something that they can get really excited about as well, and feel really creatively empowered themselves, that they're seeing this really tangible thing that they can sort of make these immediate decisions on, is a really cool way of collaborating with clients.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly one of the almost the prereqs that we have on one of our team, is when we're kicking a project off, is we need X amount of your time in terms of the process owner. And we'll have, could be daily, might be 3 times a week, might be once a week, depending on the project, but we'll have regular touch points and stand-ups where we are showing them it's the Agile thing. Again, I'm afraid it sounds like you're doing it like brilliantly, because it's you're talking about something, you're taking it away, you're doing it, you're iterating it, you're sharing it back, you're getting feedback on it. If the client then changes their mind, that's cool, that's fine, because we've broken the work down into these small chunks where we've not taken the project away for 6 months and now we're coming back to you with what we hoped was what your vision was 6 months ago. And it's like, well, what if you, this isn't it at all?
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, particularly in animation, it is very kind of front heavy. And I think, it's like that back and forth at the start is so crucial. And so it's, how quickly can we get sort of sketches? Okay, now what's the next stage? And actually we need to go back a step. And it's more important to get that right and spend longer there. And then the rest sort of isn't necessarily procedural, but it's a lot more kind of, okay, now we now we get through it, and there's still sort of tweaking and things that need to be brought in. But if you've kind of if you've nailed it at the start and then you can run with that, then you're probably onto a winner.
Yeah, cool. Okay, nice, thanks for that, Tash. Last question time, which as our regular watchers of the podcast will know, is time for a final question over a Cornish beverage. Obviously this one's very apt, I think, for this, because we were, as I mentioned earlier, chatting about getting you on the podcast at Little Orchard, which is of course
it's not the first rattler I've shared with you.
It's not, is it? No, exactly. So enjoy. Cheers. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And so last question, any chance for you to plug any podcasts, books, anything you use for your own learning or development, whatever it might be?
Yeah, there's loads. He doesn't post videos on there anymore, but there's a whole catalogue. There's a YouTube channel called Every Frame of Painting. They're incredible videos where each week he looks at sometimes a director or filmmaker, or sometimes just a use of colour, use of lighting, cinematography, whatever, and he just does a really good analysis of what makes it so good. There's a brilliant one on editing for comedy, which is all about Edgar Wright films, and he goes into depth on the scenes where he's moving to the country, the phone battery's going down, and it's just a really good, he could have shot that and just sort of shown him getting on a train, but he doesn't. He brings in all these things. Every shot, there's a joke in it. How do you make every shot count? So that's a really, really good series on there. And then the Films to Be Buried With podcast. So Brett Goldstein of Ted Lasso fame. He does just a really sweet podcast, and it's so sweet. He tells you you're dead at the start, and then he's like, but you're in heaven, and it's great, and they all want to talk to you about your life through film, and he asks these sort of great questions. And it's if you are an avid film watcher, it's the best place to go and get film recommendations, because it's people sort of really earnestly talking about films that really mean something to them, or meant something to them at a specific time in their life, or helped them through something. So that's really good. And my final one is as a not really hands-on person in animation at all, I feel like I need to sort of add a couple of skills to the skill set. Right. I'm trying to learn how to draw.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And so again, there's a YouTube series called Draw a Box, which I found really helpful. That the principle is, how do you draw a line? If you can draw a line well, then you can draw a box. And if you can draw a box, then you can draw a 3D box.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it just kind of really sets you up in literally how does your pen touch a page, and how do you make a line that works? And from there, you've got a really good, set of fundamental things that can then lead you on to being able to draw well. And so I'm really slowly making my way through that. Cool. And my lines look great.
Cool.
So I would recommend that as well.
I'm looking forward to the homemade Christmas card this year.
Yeah, just a lot of lines and boxes. It's going to look great.
That's cool. Well, thanks very much, Tash. That's a great list. Obviously, if you get asked that question again in the future, I'm sure you'll be recommending HeadTalks as well.
Yeah,
of course. Absolute top content.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much again for coming on. It's been great chatting to you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Nice one.